Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to Jen's Books. I hope you're having a really good week so far. In this video, I'm going to be introducing you to 6 more recommendations of dystopian novels which I've read and really enjoyed. Hopefully there'll be something in these recommendations that you think you might want to pick up. If you've read them before and would like to share your thoughts with me, please do in the comments. It's always great to hear what you think, and also any recommendations of other dystopian fiction that you think I might enjoy. I've recently got quite a stack that I'm working my way through. I'm currently reading Femlandia, so I'll be talking about that in my next April book roundup. But for today, I've got 6 novels, and as I say, it would be interesting to know whether anybody has read these, but they're all ones that have kind of stuck in my mind and have been an enjoyable read. What was also really interesting was how many of these books are being turned into films, which I didn't realise, or have been TV adaptations. So there's something about dystopian fiction that is clearly popular and invites sort of cinematic adaptation. I think it's probably because it's something so visual and so visceral about it all. So the first book I wanted to talk about was The End We Start From, which was written by Megan Hunter and published in 2017, and this is being turned into a book. So this is one of those, being turned into a film. So this is one of those that's currently being adapted. So the premise of this particular book is that the coasts are rising. So it feels quite prescient and believable in many ways. And all the characters are kind of unnamed. They're sort of given initials rather than names. And we start off with a character who, or our narrator, who is having a baby, and she's in the centre of London. Her partner R is currently away at this time. He's on a mountain climbing expedition, but he manages to get back to London just after their baby, who's called Zed, their son, is born. And as that's happening, there's this news coming in of this unprecedented flooding that's reaching up through the nation, and it's slowly overtaking the cities of the UK, and everything's kind of thrown into disarray and panic, and people start obviously acting in a way that they wouldn't expect to. So the book is about motherhood, and it's about that primal need to protect a child in these circumstances where civilization is kind of breaking down. And throughout the book, the characters go to R's family who have a farm, and they try to they have a house in the mountains, and they're going to go there because obviously it's high land, but they're privy to some quite graphic and awful things along the way. But these sorts of things tend to happen off screen in this story, so they do happen, but with central really to it is the story of this new mother, and at one point the couple get separated, but eventually, well, I don't want to give too much away, but what I really love about this book is it's really lyrical. The turn of phrase, everything's really spare and just beautifully written, exquisitely written, and very poetic, and it's like nothing I've ever read. And I love that in a book, when you read something and you find that it's a very distinct voice, and I found that Megan Hunter's voice in this novel is very distinct and different from any other sort of dystopian novel that I've read. You're left to sort of read between the lines, and there is horror there, but as I say, the book is really about love and hope and family and trying to protect one another. So I really enjoyed that, but for the main reason is the way it was told, that sort of lyrical, very light touch that the writer has in the way of writing, that every word counts, and it's so poetic. It's just a really, really beautiful read. A slightly older one. It's from 1994, and it's written by Yoko Ogawa. However, an English translation only reached us in 2019, translated by Stephen Snyder by Pantheon Books. And this is another book that actually there's a film in the works, as far as I know, so it'll be interesting to see how that comes out, and when and if that is revealed. But what's quite interesting about this book, it's about a narrator who's trapped. It's another unnamed narrator, which seems to be a trope in apocalyptic fiction, so it could happen to any of us. but they're living on an island under the control of the memory police. And the idea is that as time goes by, the people living on that island are forced to forget particular words and concepts, and things disappear and people disappear as well. But it can be random things like hats, perfume, birds, ribbon, just random things that disappear from people's lives. And the narrator is actually a novelist, so you can imagine that that makes things very difficult for them in their day-to-day work. And then one day, the narrator's editor appears, and they reveal that they can still remember things. They're one of the people who can remember the things that they've been forced to forget, and she helps him hide from the memory police. So it's very ambitious. The ending is ambiguous and kind of open to interpretation, and sort of the other sort of feedback I read about this novel is the ending is the thing that people find a little bit frustrating, but it's a really interesting concept, and the whole idea of the loss of language is one that really intrigued me, and I did enjoy reading the book. It was quite different again in voice from other novels that I'd read. It's quite a slow pace, and again, as I say, quite ambiguous. It's more about the concept in some ways than like a really sort of fast-paced thrilling plot or anything along those sides. So I will have some recommendations for you in a moment of books that do have those kinds of thrills and dips in them, but it is a sort of slow-paced exploration and exploration of this loss of language and ideas in this community. So it is one that I did find interesting and would recommend, but if you're looking for a thriller, it's probably not the book for you. The next one I wanted to mention is a little bit better known, which is Leave the World Behind by Rumaan Alam, and this was timingly published in 2020 during COVID. So some of you may have heard of this novel already. It had again quite a good critical response when it was published. The one that it reminds me of is The Cabin at the End of the World. So if you've read The Cabin at the End of the World, there are some similarities here in terms of the plot. And basically in this book, they have two characters, Amanda and Clay, and they are going on holiday basically to a remote corner of Long Island, a quiet reprieve from their lives in New York. And they have teenage children, and they've gone off to sort of stay in this luxurious house in the middle of nowhere. But while they're there, suddenly something happens in the outside world. It's not clear what's happened, but the power goes, the internet goes, and then in the middle of the night they have a knock on the door from an elderly couple who claim that the house is actually theirs, that they're staying, and that they need to stay there because of these events that are happening outside of the world. So it's one of those sorts of apocalyptic novels which is an exploration of character and the way that these characters react to the events that are taking place that are sort of unknown, and this unknown fear and tension that's growing in the background. And on top of all of this, there are deer herding through the area as if they are moving to escape an oncoming onslaught. So we have this imagery of these deers everywhere, which is sort of on the front cover of the book. And so it's a really interesting character exploration more than anything, and sort of in the face of an unknown risk that we're not sure what's happening, and so they're looking for a place for shelter. So it follows the exploration of those characters that are in that particular isolated environment, being thrown in together with people that they probably wouldn't normally sort of spend time with. The next book I wanted to mention is one that has been turned into a TV series, so you're likely to have heard of it, which is Station 11 by Emile St. John Mandel, which was published in 2015. I really, really enjoyed this one. This is one of those apocalyptic novels that involves a journey, and in the book it begins with the death of a famous actor who dies on stage. His name's Arthur Leander, in a performance of King Lear. A man who's an EMT runs to help him and ends up comforting a young girl called Kirsten who has witnessed this death. And this begins the beginning of a pandemic which kills 99% of the population. It's called the Georgia flu pandemic. And this character, Kirsten, grows up, and the story sort of jumps forward into the future, and we see her 15 years into the future where the population's been decimated, and she's part of a travelling symphony, travelling from town to town, entertaining people in these dystopian times. And they go back to meet some friends that had left the group at one point, and when they get there, they're overrun by bandits, and things take a sinister turn. But it's all about this. It's sort of more of it's bandits. It's more of a sort of religious cult who've taken over the location that they're going to. But it's all about the story of Kirsten as a young woman, and as she travels with the symphony through the town. And then, you know, obviously everything changes when they reach this destination, when they're looking for Charlie and Jeremy, who were the friends that went off during the journeys. As I say, again, this is another book that really focuses on the characterisation. That's a real strength here. There is a really good plot as well. I did enjoy it. The depictions of the world as an apocalyptic wasteland are really enjoyable. So there's a lot to really get out of this, and I can understand why it was turned into a TV series. Again, it's a very sort of visual. I've not watched the TV series. I'd be interested to know if anybody has, and whether it was any good. But it's also about life and hope and overcoming the circumstances that the characters find themselves in, and you find that a lot with these apocalyptic novels. You know, it's hope in the face of adversity. So if you're worried that it's going to be, you know, far too downbeat and bleak, it's actually an enjoyable read, and it's full of twists and turns on the way as well. So Station 11 is another one that I would definitely recommend. The next book I want to mention is a real sort of thriller, and that's The Fireman by Joe Hill. If you've not come across Joe Hill, you may have heard of Horns, and you know, he's been involved with other adaptations and things as well. He's Stephen King's son, but this is a controversial view. I actually prefer Joe Hill's writing. Don't get me wrong, there are loads of Stephen King books that I really love. For example, The Shining is one of my absolute favourite horror novels, but Joe Hill's work, I find incredibly enjoyable. He writes a lot of collections of short stories, which I would definitely recommend. I've really enjoyed that. There's one called Strange Weather, I think, and there's often these sort of apocalyptic themes to them. And as you can see, and I know I complain about meaty books, but that's a real chunky boy, and I remember turning the pages incredibly quickly with this one. I really enjoyed it. So again, this is and it was published in 2016 as well, I should say. There's a mysterious fungus, so think The Last of Us but not quite, that has started infecting people. It's called dragon scale, and the byproduct of this fungus is that people are spontaneously combusting, and they're doing it at an incredibly fast pace. So lots of places are burning down. These people are sort of being put in together to try and avoid the spread of this disease. And our central character is a school nurse called Harper Grayson, and she becomes infected and discovers that she's pregnant, but she tries to find shelter and is finding difficulty to find it. And then one day they come across a character called the Fireman, who seems to be impervious. He's infected with this dragon scale, but he's able to ignite and extinguish parts of his body at will. So he sort of controls the virus, or sorry, the fungus in a way that hasn't been seen before. So this creates a whole new sense of hope. And the Fireman takes her to a place where there are other people who are sort of living in this situation. But it's a real thrill. It's horrific in many cases as well. You know, it sounds like a very beautiful fungus. Their skin is covered in gold and black, but then, you know, say they burst into flame and die. So there's no known cure, and the spores are transmitted through the victim's ashes, so it's sort of everywhere. But what I really liked about this book is it's just a real page turner, loads of twists, loads of turns. You know, Joe Hill is, I think, a bit of a master of this kind of apocalyptic dreamscape that he creates. So you've got those aspects of a certain amount of journey. You've got people overcoming adversity, but it's just a really enjoyable, page-turning, fast-paced book. So some of the other books that I've mentioned are very literary, very lyrical. This is a good, pick-up thriller. And one that if you like work by Stephen King, although it is very different, you'll probably will enjoy work by Joe Hill. He writes differently from his dad, but they definitely have that sort of blockbuster feel to them. The last book I wanted to mention is The Testament of Jessie Lamb, which was written in 2012 by Jane Rogers, who you may know wrote books such as Mr. Rose Virgins. This is a book that I read quite a few years ago now, probably about 5 years ago. But the thing that really stuck with me about it, it was a real page turner. Jane Rogers really understands about putting a hook in at the end of every chapter. I couldn't put it down. I read this incredibly quickly, chapter after chapter, because as soon as I got to the end of one chapter, it was like, oh my God, what's going to happen next? And it really, really drew me on. So the idea with this particular novel is that there is a new virus that's called MDS, or maternal death syndrome. So every time a woman gets pregnant, basically when she gives birth, she dies, and that is happening across the globe. And so obviously this is a real risk and causing a lot of concern about not only these people dying, but just the human race generally as well. Some are blaming scientists, some blame God, and others claim that it's some sort of result of the environment and things that humans are doing to themselves. So Jessie Lamb is a 16-year-old girl living in this world, and as this world collapses, she moves towards idealism, and she is pregnant, and she moves towards this idea of being a hero and carrying this baby, even though that it's going to kill her. So it's about how she reacts to this in this sort of idealistic, almost religious fervour in keeping the human race going, and how she sort of is being a martyr to the cause. And the response of her family about her, particularly her father, who's a scientist, and the way they try to protect her in quite violent ways, really. They sort of try to prevent her from taking this course of action, and it's about how the family react to her taking this course of action. So there's a lot to sort of think about here. It brings up lots of areas for debate about pregnancy, about women's rights, but also about idealism and martyrdom and heroism and popular belief, and how these sorts of things can arise. But at the ground of it, it's about the relationship between Jessie and her family, and how they react to this decision that she makes. So again, I think sometimes with these books, the endings can be the kind of, not the letdown, but, they're not always neatly tied up. But I just remembered the thing I really enjoyed with this book was it just kept me turning the pages. And there's been some suggestion that it's sort of has a feel of a YA book about it. But it would be interesting to know if anybody else has read it and what your thoughts are. But it's not a huge, thick book. But as I say, I read it in a day. I just couldn't put it down. Jane Rogers really drew me on through the characterisation of Jessie and her voice coming through and her thoughts. And I really enjoyed the book. It's quite bleak. It's not a cheery missive, but if you're interested in dystopian fiction, it's another one that I recommend you give a go. So those are my 6 recommendations, or 6 more recommendations of dystopian novels, and there will be more to come because I am reading so many of them at the moment, but hopefully there's something there that will interest you. And if you're interested in hearing more about dystopian fiction, or just generally recommendations and reviews of books that I'm reading, do please subscribe, like, share, whatever you want to do. It's just lovely to have you along for the ride and to be able to share my thoughts with other book fanatics, because that's what we are. But thank you very much, and I shall see you again later in the week. Thanks. Bye.